Welcome back, everyone. So we are here to speak about doing high dynamic range photography using focus stacking in our cameras, aside from using AEB mode on your camera, which is auto exposure bracketing, which is a great feature to use if you're looking to go on a long hike up a mountain top and you're trying to travel light without your tripod and to capture some high dynamic range photography. Now, what we're going to do today, before we get started, we are going to make sure you subscribe down below. Give me a phone call if you're looking for any messages. Oh, I'm right over here. Sorry, 716-640-3848 up top. And check out my portfolio at riolophotography.myportfolio.com, which is right up here. So, high dynamic range photography. How do you get those images that look on a screen, say at your local Best Buy store or Target or Walmart, whatever, that are on the screens of every TV that they're trying to sell? You ever wondered how they capture those locations and or how they captured a high dynamic range photo like that? Some, excuse me, I'm a little raspy. Some of those photos are captured in auto exposure bracketing, which is featured in most cameras nowadays. You can do auto exposure bracketing. You take separate shots at different exposures and you combine them in Lightroom. There is another way to accomplish this look. You can do a focus stacking in using an ND filter and a manual shutter if you wanted to, depending on how creative that you're trying to get. Me personally, I like to shoot a high shutter speed to capture and freeze like the leaves and trees, depending on what I'm shooting. I like to underexpose the sky. And then I also like to do a very long exposure with an ND filter, depending on how bright it is throughout the day, which captures very, silky, smooth. You can get creative with motion in your photos. And then we're going to edit all these photos in post, and we're going to bring them over to Photoshop in layers, and we're going to blend these images together. Now, this is a recreation of an image that I've done 5 years ago. It just so happens that it actually popped up on my timeline that I did it 5 years, so what a coincidence. But accomplishing these type of photos can be done in multiple ways. Me personally, like I said, I like to shoot handheld, AEB mode, auto exposure bracketing, while I'm hiking, so I don't have to carry my heavy tripod. I have a Me Photo tripod, and it's pretty heavy. So that's how I shoot when I'm on long hikes. When I shoot with my drone and I'm trying to achieve high dynamic range photography, I do the same thing. It's auto bracketing system. Most drones do have this. But blending images in together in Photoshop, it can become a master skill, and it can literally boost you up in your photography and also raise the level and where you want to be. You can get very creative with this stuff, so let's go ahead and grab our gear. I'm going to pack up. We're going to head over to Long Point State Park out in Chautauqua Lake. We're going to walk through the shots that I've done, and then we'll go ahead and get on the computer and see exactly what we captured. Okay? Thank you. Okay, so I went and took my shot. What we did is we did multiple things. I'm not sure if the audio is recording in photo, still image mode. So let's go ahead, the audio. So I want to explain exactly what I did. So now, using the Nikon Z6, I used a manual shutter, a tripod, and an ND filter on my lens, since it's really bright out and it's hard to get a long exposure on on the water and the movement here. So basically what I did, I took a very quick, fast shutter speed shot of the foreground. I focused on the rock here, focused on the yellow, beautiful flowers blooming, focused in the background on the bench and the trees in the background. This is going to give you a very sharp image and freeze everything basically really sharp. You're going to freeze it in the frame. Now this is where you can get really creative. You can do you turn your ND filter down a lot of stops to make it a lot darker, and you can roll your shutter speed really down to like 5 seconds or 10 seconds depending on how bright it is outdoors. You can adjust your ISO to the lowest setting, and you can also go up with your aperture, open up your aperture. Close your aperture, sorry. Now, I wouldn't recommend shooting higher than an f9 stop, because the higher you go in f stops, the more flat the photo looks. You won't get that depth of field in your photos. When you shoot at a wide open aperture like a 1.8, like I do with video on a 50mm, that's when you get the blurred out background of the bokeh feel, which everybody loves. I love shooting like that when it comes to portraits and video. Now I'm at an f2.8, I'm on the 24-70mm lens, so I'm just showing you exactly what I've done. Like I said, I focused on the bench, I focused on the foreground here, and I also focused on the flowers and just froze all that and made it really nice and sharp. Now I turned up my ND filter to the darkest setting. It might be 10 stops. I'm not sure how many stops are on that filter. This gave me the opportunity to do a very long exposure and capture some motion in the water here when boats are going by. I always do an underexposure for the sky to get a better detailed sky, so you can do that as well with an ND filter, or you can just do that with a really high shutter speed without the ND filter. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take all the focus stacking and blend them all together in Photoshop. But first what we're going to do, we're going to go into Lightroom, edit all of our photos to the same color and the same style that we want it. Then we're going to drag them over to Photoshop in layers, and we're going to auto align those layers and go ahead and blend them all together. This gives you a really sharp scene with motion in the water, and it doesn't give you an overexposed sky. So basically you are exposing for each element in your landscape photo. You're exposing for the rocks, you're exposing for the trees, you're exposing for the bench, which is our center of attention, rule of thirds subject sitting right here, and you're exposing for the water and the sky, and you're blending all those high dynamic range photos together, which gives you a really nice photo. So if you're interested in learning photography and want to come out with me and do this, this is my passion, my life. This is all I want to do for the rest of my life. So follow me on Christopher M. Riolo Photography LLC on Facebook. You can check out my portfolio at riolophotography.myportfolio.com. So let's go ahead and jump over to Lightroom and Photoshop and see exactly what we captured today, so we can go ahead and create our beautiful high dynamic range photo that everybody's trying to learn how to do. This is one of my favorite things I like doing. It does take quite a bit of time, but if you're really into getting those really beautiful jaw-dropping landscapes, this is what you got to do, and this is how I learned. This took me about 6 to 7 years of building my photography and my landscapes, and this is how I shoot. Sometimes I will shoot handheld on AEB, which is auto exposure bracketing. You can accomplish that and get some really nice high dynamic range photos with handheld if you don't have a tripod, or if you're out hiking a mountain, nobody wants to haul a heavy tripod and extra gear with them. So stay tuned, let's go take a look in Photoshop and see exactly what we captured.
Went and already uploaded the photos into Lightroom, and I've made my basic adjustments, and I'm going to be using just 4 photos specifically for this image. The last one that I did 5 years ago of this specific scene was, I believe, 5. It was more dramatic, sunset, had more colors and everything, so, but we're not going to get too crazy with adjusting This is just for the purpose of this video to show you how to create in a high dynamic range photography by blending the images together yourself in Photoshop, and you can get more creative with this. I wish I would have went a little bit longer exposure on the water to get a little more foggy, smooth water surface. But like I said, it was bright during the middle of the day. The sun was not setting too close to the horizon, so we had to go ahead and just move ahead and just use what we could for the video. So what I did, I already made my specific adjustments here. Contrast, noise, sharpness, color the way I want it to feel right now. I'm just gonna do like a broad daylight shot here. There's not too much detail into the sky, which I wish I could show you, because I usually underexpose for the sky and it gives you more detail in the sky. But at this time, unfortunately, this is during the time that Canada's having the wildfires and it's just smoky and hazy. There's no detail in the sky whatsoever, just smoke, and just looks terrible. And praying for everybody in Canada, by the way. I hope everybody makes it out safe. I've been to Alberta, Canada, one of my favorite places to ever visit. And it's very sad, and I hope the wildlife and everything make it out safe. So prayers with you guys. So what we're going to do is we're going to select our 4 photos that we already edited in Lightroom. We're going to right click on all 4 of those photos, and then we're going to open them up as in edit in and open at the bottom as layers in Photoshop. I've already imported them into Photoshop so we can get started. Excuse me. I feel like I'm losing my voice. There's still smoke outside. Pray to God it's not affecting me and or others today. So in order to go ahead and start blending our images together, we got to make sure we realize where our focus point is on all these images. I know my first layer is pretty much as close to the perfect exposure shot that I'm looking for, so I use that as my base layer where I'm going to blend the rest of the images in together. With that base image, I went and I believe I zoomed in on the foreground right here where all the grass is growing through the rocks. As you can see, it's extremely sharp. So we're going to zoom back out. So now I know I need to blend in some sharpness back into the rock here. It's not too bad. The camera I use, the Nikon Z6, it's just amazing. So I was going to use my Nikon Z7, but I was shooting the video and I already had the Z6 out. So I do know that we need to blend in the background of the bench and the trees. We're going to go ahead and do that as well. I believe I do have one more image that gets these flowers in a little more focus because I got just the grass right here very sharp. What I did is let's explain what I did. I'm not sure if I explained it good enough. While we were at the location, I did record on the Ninja 5 as I was taking the photos, but it did not record my audio, so we're going to go ahead and do it while we're editing here. So I took separate shots. What did I do specifically? Well, when I took the shot of the foreground first, I focused on the grass, as I said, and I focused at a really high shutter speed. I went above, I believe it was around 500 seconds, 500th of a second, to at least not capture any motion and make sure we froze time so this way it wasn't blurred out and got it really nice and sharp. I did the same thing with the bench and the trees in the background, and I also did the same thing with the rock in the foreground on the other shots. Now when it comes to getting creative, when you have a scene like this, you can underexpose for the sky, and you can also overexpose with a longer shutter speed in order to capture a silky smooth water. I used a 10-stop ND filter, so it allowed me to stop down and do at least, I believe it was a 8-second exposure or maybe a 5-second exposure on the water to smooth it out. I did a really I tried doing an extremely underexposure on the sky, but it just didn't do us any justice because there's no clouds, all hazy, there's nothing in the sky. It was just plain. So unfortunately, that's what we got to work with for the purpose of the video. So I'm going to use this as a base layer. But first thing that we need to do, we need to hit Function, Command, if you have a Mac, or Control Command, and we need to select all the layers. Now we're going to, I believe it's up here. Yep, up into Edit at the top of your screen. We're going to go down to Auto Align Layers. Now, for the most part, the auto aspect of it works really good. So we're going to go ahead and click OK, and that's going to automatically align all of our layers. So this way, when we're blending, we're not messing up anything with the image and everything's staying perfectly aligned. All right, so we can go ahead and unheal that. Now what we're going to do is we got to take a look and see what is underneath our shots here. Like, what exactly? Now see how this is a little underexposed? Now this is where we can get a little creative. We can create a little more darkness up in here and make it look like that the sun was going down at this time. So what we're going to do here, we're going to click on our base layer, which is our top layer. We're going to open up a mask. Okay, so now we got to come up here and open up our brush tool. You need to select black. Okay, so now I got black. Let's do, and now we'll go up here. Depending on how big of an area that you're actually blending in, you need to just test it out. It is working. I can see down below. We can turn up the opacity. See how dark it's making the bench back there? We're going to undo the brush tool. Okay, so when you start off with this, you got to really slowly blend these in together so you're not really doing anything crazy. But we are going to blend this in down here. Make it a little more dramatic. For the most part, this area is nice and sharp. But we're going to get a little more darkness up in here. Okay. Make sure when you're doing this, you want to make sure you're not going too crazy, because if you do that, you're going to see brush strokes. See how more dramatic that is? Not only I will show you in just 1 second. You don't want to make things too crazy, but you can get very creative with this, especially if you're focus stacking and focusing on different areas. You can really get a dramatic feel in a photo. Now, let's go ahead and focus in here. Now look how much clearer that bench is. Okay, let's give you an aspect of a good idea of what it looked like. We'll deactivate this, disable layer, and that's what it looked like. This ain't in focus. None of this is in focus. Just the front is. So if we enable the layer mask, now look how much sharper it is. If you want to zoom in while you're blending in, I always recommend that, because then you can get a little more tedious about it. See how much more it's bringing this alive? Now all the sharpness is coming back in all this. Isn't that insane? Like even this stick right here, sharpness is all coming back, because we are focus stacking. We're basically blending all of our focus points together in the separate shots that we took. You always need to make sure you know where and what you focused on in each photo, and which photo is behind the main photo, so you're not blending in something that you don't want to blend in. But look how much different in sharpness that is just by blending these layers in, because the first shot I focused on the foreground, and on this one when I focused on the trees I used a higher shutter speed and froze all these leaves, and it looks so much sharper. Like, look at that. That's just, it's crazy how much better you can get with something like this. It's weird. What is that in the background? Couldn't even tell you on that one. It looks like something's in the background there, doesn't it? Right here. What is that? Oh, I believe somebody was... Oh, no, those are leaves. That means... Yeah, that's how much we did not have. Because all the leaves... The reason why we're getting this effect is because the leaves were moving too much in the last photo in the background. So now we're just blending it at this point. So now that we see that we're getting a little of a ghost look because of the image underneath, the tree branches must have been down here. What I'll do is take this, raise up the size of my brush, and I'm just going to go over this whole thing. So this way we're not killing ourselves on editing time. And I'm just going to blend it all right back into the photo. See the difference? The sky is a little more underexposed than the shot underneath, so we're going to go ahead and make sure we change that sky as well. Now look at the dramatic feel up here in the background when it comes to this bench. It's really cool looking. Look at the sharpness coming back. See the difference? And now you're getting a little look like it was a little more like a sunset. You just want to make sure you don't see any brushes. So we're going to raise the size again. This photo, we want to make sure we're grabbing it all and we're not getting a ghost look. And not only that, look how much detail it brought back. Right back here on the horizon. Like I said, you can get very creative with this stuff as long as you're good at blending in Photoshop. Now that just looks so much better. Lots of sharpness up here in the background. I mean, if you want to go ahead and change more, what should I say, highlight and change your edit, you can by all means do so and bring it back into Lightroom. But I'm going to stick with this feel. Okay, so I like how that looks right there. There is some areas in here we could probably blend in a little more. Make it a little bit more moody. The underexposed. I actually used a darker image underneath the blend in to make it a little more dramatic. Excuse me. So when you get a good feel after your first blend, you want to go ahead and once again function command select the layer that you had the mask on, and then select the bottom layer that you blended together. Now what we're going to do is hit function command E, I believe it is. Yep, and it combines those two images into one image. Now we're going to move on from here. We're going to create another mask. Now we're going to check to see underneath what is sharper underneath. Okay, right there is the water. You see how smooth it is I did with the long exposure. So we're going to do the water last. So I'm going to take this down to the last layer. Now, if we take a look here, I believe this foreground is pretty sharp though. Oh, that is the underlayer. Not too much of a difference in the rock. But we're gonna go ahead and blend it in anyways. Actually, I think I focused right over here. Let's take a look at that spot. I'm trying to make this video as quick as possible, guys, so you're not watching a very long introduction and all that, but for tutorial purposes, if you're very interested in this, you would stay to the whole end of this video so you know exactly what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. Alright. I believe this is not the right rock photo. So we're going to go back in the Lightroom and look for where our sharp rock was. That's it. That one's blurred out. That one's really blurred out. No, actually that was the right one. Let's go back to Photoshop. Okay, so we're going to create another mask. What we're going to do is we're going to blend it in. Just very lightly. We don't need to blend in too crazy on this one just because the foreground down here is pretty sharp in my eyes already, so we can just sit here and do a little more. Some of this is pretty sharp already, if you ask me. But we're gonna just go ahead and blend this in. It was pretty sharp to begin with, but this one underneath is a slight difference because I focused it on the grass coming out of the ground. Well, I noticed a difference right down here. If you take a look, you can see more detail in the little rocks in the dirt. And now, if you want, you can just keep toggling back and forth to see what's in sharp, what's not, or what's in focus, what's not in focus on this main image. Alright, that one looks pretty good to me. I think that's pretty sharp, to be honest with you. So what we're going to do is same thing. Function command select both. Function command E combine them both. So now underneath we have the long exposure of the water. Okay. So now we're going to create another mask. And now we are going to slowly blend this in at a lower opacity. We don't want to get too crazy. But it can create a very interesting photo. I like that rock right there though. Oh yeah. Because I focused on the water, it actually brought out more detail in this rock down here, which is pretty cool. Back up. See how it's getting rid of the wave. I mean, a lot of people, yes, like the waves. But if you were looking to get really creative using capturing motion and stuff like that, you can get really pretty cool creative wise. Turn the opacity up a little more. And you even brought this tree branch in focus even more, which I like a lot. The sun came out and gave the color on the rocks a little more. Look how much sharper these rocks are turning out on the edges, because this is where I had the focus point. It's just so much. I mean, you would not get this if you focused in one area. And just did a one shot. So there's a boat that was there we're gonna get rid of. It looks like they weren't in the last shot. Let's get rid of this. That boat looks like they were, that's where they went by the end of the shot. Now, as you can see, the sun was hitting the water here. So now this is just gonna make for a more realistic shot, because look, now it looks like the sun's coming at an angle down, and you have all that darkness inside the path right here where I walked down. This is where you can get creative, everyone. Let's undo this last brush tool. I got a little crazy with the boat. It's giving me kind of a halo look on the boat. So what we're going to do is we'll take, just for this purpose, I think I like bringing out more of the sky in this shot, just because the sun is already a little bit more brighter. You gotta be very careful when you're doing these edits. Do not want people seeing your brush strokes in your final images. But this is how you focus stack, guys, and how you can utilize it in making HDR images to get everything in full sharpness. I mean, just by focusing on the water over here, it literally brought this whole stick out in focus. It brought these rocks out. It brought the rock over here, and it smoothed out some of the water to give it a cool motion capture. And everything looks pretty good. Nope, not except for that spot. We just created something we didn't want to create. So we just go backwards. Yeah, guys. I mean, check it out. That is just phenomenal. The quality. You do not need a 50 megapixel camera and be shooting on f9. So basically what I did was I exposed for every element in different focus point areas. Basically, I exposed for the rocks, I exposed for the trees, I exposed for the grass, I exposed for capturing motion in the water, and I exposed for the sky. Unfortunately, the sky didn't have any detail, but we can always make it look like we have a little dramatic photo here. I mean, it looks awesome. Now it looks like it's coming at an angle. So let's go ahead and crop. Now when you're auto aligning your photos, you got to make sure that these edges are not, you have to crop in a little bit. See how you see the back part of our working platform here? So we have to crop in over that a little bit because it auto adjusted a few layers and moved our photos around. So we're going to go ahead, bring this back in. Just by a little. And always remember, stay with the rule of thirds. Everything looks better when it's off center. If your subject's off center, you do not want to get crazy with always putting somebody right in the middle or your subject right in the middle. You want to be off center. It's called the rule of thirds in photography, and always keeping it off center. Portraits, your eye would be, maybe your eyes would be the subject that you're shooting, so you want to make sure that's a little off center as well. But look at that, guys. a huge difference. And getting creative, you can just imagine if you're on the coastline of Sicily or coastline of Portugal where I was, and the waves are just crashing and you have a nighttime city all lit up and you're trying to capture the waves, and you could do a long exposure and smooth it out and capture all that motion. But yeah, this is how we can shoot very high dynamic range photos, keeping everything sharp without stopping down with our aperture, because anything past f8, in my opinion, flattens out the image. There's no depth of field left, and it just looks boring and flat. So this is how I do high dynamic range. I started off doing it this way. Like I said, if you're interested in shooting auto exposure bracketing, you can do that all handheld and while you're hiking, so this way you're not going through the hassle of carrying a heavy tripod or whatnot with all your extra gear on you. You could just go handheld shooting with auto, and you can combine those in the Lightroom. But to me, if you have the time that you want to take and get creative with something like this, I would go this route, because this is, in my opinion, the best way to shoot high dynamic range photography. And not only that, it is the best way to get creative with your landscapes. All right, I appreciate you watching this video. Let's go back, and what we're gonna do is maybe we'll just throw a little spin on it. We'll take some curves just to make it more dramatic. Let's bring down some shadows right here. Then we're gonna pop some of this highlight. See, now look at it. I mean, now that just looks dramatic. Maybe a little too overexposed, so we'll bring down some highlights over here. Now we can do, first let's go ahead and make sure we combine these two images we just blended. We can come up in here, down to brightness, turn down the brightness just a tad, go back in the curves. We'll have to adjust that. No, we need to adjust these highlights just a little bit because that's too much. All right. Now look how much more dramatic that looks. That looks dramatic. Now we're gonna bring up a little more shade. Now we're gonna combine all these. Nope, not the brightness yet. We're gonna take the brightness one, add a little more contrast. We'll combine that. Now, for my final touch, I'm going to add a gradient. Reverse. Diamond. No, not diamond. Diamond. I'm sorry, radial. Then we're going to bring it all the way down back and just work our way down, just to tone down some of the light on the edges of that sun hitting the water. See the difference that it can do? It's way too much right about here. This color doesn't look right. Yes, it is. Alright guys, that's the final image and I'm going to go with. And let me tell you, this is the way to go.
Okay guys, there you have it. This is how you create a high dynamic range photo using focus stacking and blending these images together and getting very creative. This comes in handy, guys. I've definitely have noticed the big difference in my photos, and again, as usual, I always shoot in RAW. So if you're interested in photos, again, here's my phone number. Let's go over here, right up top, and let me know. I do all events, weddings, graduations, senior photos. It doesn't matter. I like to get creative. So if you're interested, take a look at my portfolio at riolophotography.myportfolio.com. Make sure you subscribe down below. Have a good day.